In this video, we'll be talking about requirements management. Once we've got our requirements, how do we actually manage them through the process of elicitation and design and an actual final delivery of our product? Well, that's what we'll be talking about now. One of the reasons requirements are so important is they give a clear line of accountability in the process, and we call this traceability. We should be able to see how the requirements came into being, how they've been changed through the process, because we expect requirements probably to change a little bit, and how they've been met and validated in the final product and the final system we've actually designed. For a final system, we need to make sure each of our requirements have been addressed and have been fulfilled in our actual system. So it's really important to keep what we call a log of requirements and some sort of management process of how we can keep them all. So we want to, of course, know what they are, why they were created, who's responsible for them, how they've been modified, along with the other data that we've looked at, for example, type and risk and all those other attributes that we previously looked at, which are important to keep along with our requirements. There's a few different options that scale with the size of our projects. We could go with something starting with maybe a whiteboard or on paper to start off with, in some sort of a grid format maybe. We then could go to a spreadsheet or something like that. Not particularly well managed, but gives us a bit of a picture and gives us a nice layout of actually putting our requirements in and being able to see them all. Or we could, and this is particularly what we do for medium to larger systems, have some specially designed systems engineering requirements management software. And that will keep track of everything for us. It will notify us of changes and allow everything to be searchable and allow and streamline the process of requirements solicitation and management. Now, some customers and clients, for example, may have specific software that they want you to use, like DAWs, for example, which is commonly used in defense industries. So the contractors have gone down this path of requirement solicitation. They've come together with their requirements, and hopefully, once we've got all these in place and we've signed off on them, we shouldn't have any misunderstandings, or we should minimize the misunderstandings because the requirements are clear and unambiguous and all those other properties we looked at earlier. And should ensure the final system actually performs its mission. It actually fulfills the requirements and does what it's meant to do. And hopefully, there shouldn't be any great surprises because the customers have seen through their review processes what the requirements actually are, how they're being met, and as these are expanded on as we look down into subsystem design and things like that, we see more and more what's actually going on and what's available to us. Well, one way that we can create our requirements listing is in something like a spreadsheet, like we've got here, whether it be a spreadsheet on paper, which might be our starting point, or a spreadsheet in something like Excel or Google Docs. Basically, what we're trying to create is putting the requirements in an orderly prescribed format where we can see them all and we know what's coming up and we know how to add to them very easily. Now, what we have here is a very much bridge version of what we had in our requirements in one of the previous videos, but it has most of the main fields that we've got there. So here we've got our requirements, each with its unique primary ID. Then we have what the requirement actually is, and we could have a short name for this requirement as well. We have the interface, or what this is actually, what part of our work breakdown structure, for example, this would actually relate to. We then have our priority, how important is this, and our risk associated with the requirement. Our originator, who actually, our originator or our source, who actually proposed it or where was it proposed. The history associated with the type, so we can classify and search based on our requirements. So let's briefly look at an example of our requirements listing filled out in this spreadsheet format. There we have our requirements, each with their own ID, so ID 1, ID 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 for each of our requirements. For each of those we have the ID just 1 as the actual requirement, the 1P, we have 1P there for our performance criteria of how this needs to be met. We have 1V, which is our validation criteria, how we're actually going to validate this particular requirement. And 1R is our rationale. So we've got our performance criteria, our validation criteria, and our rationale. We then look at our other listings there. We've got our interface, so what part of the system is this going to correspond to? We've got our priority, how high or low is the priority for this particular part, and the associated risk for it. So if we don't, and we can use our risk table to fill in this risk. And in this case, if we don't detect that the person's actually entered into the vehicle, that's a significantly higher risk. We then have the originator, and for these ones we happen to have Mickey Mouse, Roadrunner and Donald Duck, just for nice original names there, and the history associated with them as well. So that first one created on a certain date, modified at a certain date, and we see the modification there that it was modified from 10 seconds down to 1 second, for example. And then the type there, the first two relate to detection, then the next one reliability, and then another one relating to detection again. And we could do a similar sort of thing. I haven't filled out all the other fields here, but for all our other main requirements, because this is the first main requirement, detection of entry into a vehicle. Then we have requirements related to maybe classifying entry into a vehicle and sub-requirements. So is it classification between authorized or unauthorized entry? A log for this as well, and recording our false alarm rate, for example. And then we have things like reporting unauthorized entry, so setting off an alarm so that we have local attention. It's been reported visually and audibly. Remote communication with remote communication of some kind or another to inform the owner, and customizing our owner reporting details so they can actually put in their own phone number and so on. And so we could put in our performance statements, our verification statements, and our rationale statements, or why that requirement actually exists for each of those as well.